They fined me $500 for a mailbox that was 2 inches too tall, and when I refused to replace it, they padlocked my gate. 17 days later, their so-called master key jammed in my front door, and she called 911 like I was the criminal. Welcome to my channel. I'm Alex Ward, civil engineer out of Tempe, Arizona, husband, father of one, and very tired of watching decent neighbors get bullied under color of community standards. If you're new here, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know which corner of America's HOA maze you're stuck in tonight. The morning this began, the desert air still smelled of wet concrete and hot dust from last night's storm. I'd been sanding the porch rails, trying to keep the place the way my late father taught me. Hands-on, meticulous, debt-free. He left this house to me after his stroke, and I promised Mom I'd protect it. Losing him was one wound. Watching strangers in khaki polos dictate what color mulch I could use felt like reopening it with a dull blade. The HOA president, Lorraine Kemp, people called her the Karen in Kashmir, stood on my porch that Thursday with a clipboard and a forced smile. Section 7.2 requires uniform paint on visible fencing, she said, gesturing with her pen like a baton. Yours varies by half a shade. I remember laughing, thinking she was kidding. Then she handed me a violation notice for $250. The paper was warm from her hand, and the toner smell bit my nose like ozone before a storm. I fixed it, even matched her approved birch mist swatch. A week later, another notice, unauthorized garden structure. It was my daughter's little playhouse. Then came one for improperly stored waste receptacle, because my trash can lid wasn't fully closed after pickup day. Each envelope was heavier than the last, not from paper but from arrogance. I started documenting everything, dates, photos, receipts, because I knew eventually they'd overplay their hand. That moment came faster than I thought. One night, around 9:40 p.m., I heard metal scraping at the front door. The peephole showed Lorraine, clutching a jangling ring of keys and muttering something about inspection rights. My wife Dana filmed from the hallway, her phone light catching the brass as it twisted. When the key stuck, Lorraine's voice cracked into the radio. "Dispatch, I need units here now. Homeowner is being uncooperative." 2 cruisers rolled up, lights spinning against the white siding like carnival glare. The officer, a young guy named Morales, looked from her to me and then at the key lodged in my lock. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "this isn't a criminal matter. It's a property dispute." He asked if I wanted to press charges for attempted entry. I didn't, not yet. I just wanted her gone and a record of what she'd done. He logged the incident, Tempe PD case number 22-9143, and told her, "You can't force access without a warrant or owner consent." Her face flushed a shade darker than her lipstick. The next morning, my mailbox held a certified letter. Notice of assessment. Emergency security review fee. $1,200 due within 15 days. The gall of it was almost art. That's when something inside me shifted from anger to calculation. I started digging through the HOA's filings at the Maricopa County Recorder's Office, CCRs, amendments, parcel maps. Years of engineering taught me how to read what others overlook. Line weights, boundary easements, usage rights. Somewhere in there, I knew, lay the crack in their foundation. But before I tell you what I found, ask yourself this. How far should an HOA be allowed to reach into your private property? Paint? Gardens? Locks? Where's the line where community care turns into coercion? Drop your thoughts below, because this story only matters if people like us start drawing that line together. I spent that weekend surrounded by paper, county records, bylaws, budget disclosures printed from their own site before they could scrub them. The smell of toner and cheap ink filled my garage, mixing with motor oil and coffee. Each binder snap echoed like a countdown click. By Sunday night, I'd mapped the original plat lines for the subdivision. Lot 22A, mine, included an old access easement running 10 feet beyond my fence. It had been dedicated to the city in 1987, but never formally transferred to the HOA. In plain English, they didn't legally own the path they'd been patrolling. Knowledge nugget number 1. In Arizona, HOAs only control common areas they actually own or maintain. If a tract remains city-dedicated, their authority stops at the recorded line, no matter how much they inspect. That Monday, I brought copies to my neighbor Carl Mendoza, Retired building inspector, old school guy with a wheezy laugh and a thermos that smelled like burnt coffee. He thumbed through the pages, tapping his pen. "They've been citing people for fence alignment on property that isn't theirs," he said. "That's overreach, plain and simple." He agreed to help me verify permits and logs. Dana called our friend Marisol Torres, an attorney specializing in HOA law. By Tuesday, we had a small team, a quiet rebellion forming in my kitchen over spreadsheets and bagels. Carl suggested pulling their insurance policy filings. They list assets covered by liability. If that strip isn't listed, the insurer won't back them on any enforcement there. He was right. The policy's schedule of insured properties ended 52 feet short of my gate. The inspection area Lorraine used as her justification wasn't insured, wasn't authorized, and wasn't even legally accessible without permission. Still, I played it cool. The next board meeting was posted for March 14th, 6:00 p.m. Community Center. I planned to attend as if nothing had changed, but first, I wanted more. Emails, internal chatter, maybe something to show selective enforcement. Through a public records request to the city clerk, they sometimes forwarded HOA communications about shared drainage easements. I got 3 PDF chains between Lorraine and a junior code officer. She'd asked the city to coordinate joint inspections on non-compliant residences, listing only 6 addresses, everyone belonging to homeowners who'd opposed her re-election. That was my fuse. Dana looked at me across the table, phone resting by her coffee mug. "You're not doing this to get even, right?" she asked. "You're doing it to stop her from doing it to everyone." She knew the answer before I said it, but I said it anyway. "Exactly, and I'll do it by the book." The next afternoon, while I waited in line at the recorder's office for certified parcel copies, a man behind me recognized my address. "You're in Foothills East? Heard your HOA president's on a power trip." He handed me a folded copy of the Tempe Daily Chronicle. A short piece inside read, "Homeowners allege selective fines in Foothills East HOA." Anonymous source. 2 paragraphs. A spark, but not yet a fire. That night I called the journalist, Elliot Brand. He agreed to meet at a diner off Rural Road. He wore glasses too big for his face, tapping a digital recorder against the table. "Off record, unless you say otherwise," he promised. I slid him the violation notices, the insurance excerpt, and the emails. He whistled low. "If you've got proof of unauthorized Z entry, that's criminal trespass under state code. They're gonna bury themselves if they double down." He was right. But I wasn't ready to go public. Not yet. Let them think I was quiet, beaten, compliant. Let them hang their next notice like a flag of arrogance. 2 days later, I got it. Failure to maintain uniform lighting, $500 fine. They claimed my porch bulb was non-standard temperature, warm white, 2700 K, instead of HOA-approved daylight white. I laughed so hard I almost spilled my coffee. Then I printed it, time-stamped it, and filed it under Evidence Pattern. In the comments, I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced an HOA that fined you for something absurd? Mailbox color, fence height, lawn length? Tell me what it was and what you did about it. Or if you're watching quietly from an HOA board seat, drop a note too. Maybe we'll all learn where reason still lives. By Friday morning, the smell of printer paper had become a part of the house. Dana joked that our dining room looked like a low-budget law office. But it wasn't chaos, it was evidence. Each folder tabbed and numbered. Fines, emails, inspections, city records. My engineering mind treated it like a bridge load test. Measure, verify, stress, repeat until failure. Lorraine must have sensed something because she sent her vice president, a man named Dale Winters, to smooth things over. He knocked on the door, hands clasped like a preacher at confession. "Alex," he said, "we don't want trouble. You've been flagged by the compliance team because of optics. If you just replace the bulb and settle the fines, this can go away." "Optics?" I repeated. "You mean it looks bad that you tried to unlock my door on camera?" He twitched, but held his line. "You're escalating this unnecessarily." I smiled, stepping onto the porch. "No, Dale, I'm documenting." That word made him flinch. The next 48 hours became a case study in passive-aggressive warfare. The HOA website posted a new security advisory, warning residents to report unusual activity near restricted lots. Neighbors started whispering, some out of fear, others curiosity. Then Carl showed up with a grin and a flash drive. "Got something you'll like," he said, waving it like a winning lottery ticket. It contained time-stamped video from his security camera, Lorraine herself inspecting fences on what turned out to be city land. The footage included her saying, "If they don't comply, we'll fine them till they move." Knowledge nugget number 2, selective enforcement, fining some owners but not others for identical issues, is grounds for invalidating HOA actions under most state common interest community statutes. We now had motive, means, and pattern. Marisol, ever calm behind her ink-stained cuffs, drafted a certified letter demanding a hearing under Section 33-1804 of Arizona law, the right to appeal enforcement actions within 10 business days. She said softly, "Give them rope. Let them refuse due process in writing." I mailed it the next morning, return receipt requested, tracking number 9214-8501-3476-9000-4372-15. They signed, then ignored it. By the end of March, Lorraine had stacked 6 citations on me, totaling $3,350. The irony? Their own rules capped fines at $1,000 per month. I highlighted the clause in neon yellow, added it to the binder. That weekend, the desert wind carried the smell of mesquite and a neighbor's grill. Dana sat on the porch steps beside me, brushing our dog's fur into a small pile. "You could still sell and move," she said gently. I shook my head. "Dad worked 40 years to pay this off. This isn't about me anymore." For anyone watching, I want to know, how far should an HOA's control go? Should they have any power to fine you for the look of your own home, or should those decisions stay private? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every one, even the angry ones. A week later, I discovered the crack that would become my wedge. While reviewing a plat map amendment filed in 2005, I saw something odd. Lot 22A's drainage easement had been reallocated to the HOA on paper, but the deed of transfer had never been executed. Meaning the HOA thought they owned that parcel, but the county still listed the original developer as the title holder. If I could track down the dissolved developer's successor entity, I might be able to acquire those rights. I called an old friend, Ben Kim, a title analyst in Phoenix. He ran a search and laughed. "Alex, the developer's holding company was absorbed by Maricopa Realty Trust 5 years ago. You could probably buy that remnant parcel for peanuts. They're liquidating." That was it, the leverage I needed. I didn't say a word to anyone except Marisol and Dana. Quiet moves win wars. While the HOA prepped their next round of letters, I wired $1,800 to the trust for the parcel transfer. Within 3 weeks, I received the deed by certified mail, signed, notarized, recorded. I was now the owner of the easement that wrapped the south edge of the community, the one Lorraine's patrols used daily. Reversal number 1 was in motion. I slipped the recorded deed into a transparent sleeve labeled Phase 1, Control Access. The weight of that page in my hands was like holding a key they didn't know existed. Ben's email hit my inbox at 7:43 a.m. Sharp. Recording complete. Parcel deed posted to county database. The document ID glowed on my screen like a quiet victory flare. I opened it 3 times just to hear the PDF's satisfying click, as if each confirmation sealed another inch of control back into my life. For the next few days, I said nothing. I still mowed the lawn on Saturdays, waved at passing neighbors, even nodded at Dale when he drove by in the HOA golf cart. But every polite smile was a countdown. Lorraine's ex-board meeting notice went out by email. Mandatory attendance for homeowners regarding security violations. Marisol read it over my shoulder. "They're trying to shame you publicly," she said, adjusting her glasses. "Good. Let them record themselves doubling down." We spent that evening assembling our presentation. I printed parcel maps, insurance schedules, and Lorraine's own inspection requests. Carl added still frames from his footage. Marisol highlighted each law she knew by number. ARS 33-1804, 33-1807, 33-1808, like a composer marking crescendos. Dana brought coffee and a calm hand on my shoulder. "You sure you want this to go public?" she asked. "I'm done hiding," I said. March 14th arrived crisp and dry. The HOA hall smelled like old carpet and lemon disinfectant. Folding chairs squeaked as residents settled in. Lorraine sat at the head table, pearls tight around her neck, the same clipboard in front of her. "Next order," she began, voice smooth but sharp. "Property at 1422 East Amber Lane. Multiple non-compliance issues, refusal to correct, repeated defiance." I raised my hand. "Permission to respond?" She sighed. Briefly. I set my folder on the podium. "The property you've cited 6 times is in full compliance under Article 6, Section 4. The so-called violations were fabricated, and your authority to enforce them on Lot 22A ceased in 1987 when the city retained easement ownership." She frowned. "That's incorrect." "Then perhaps you should look at this." I slid the certified deed copy across the table. "As of 3 weeks ago, that easement is owned by me, personally. Any patrol or inspection on that strip is now trespassing." Murmurs rippled through the room. Dale leaned toward her, whispering something that made her lips tighten. She tried to recover. "This is a stunt. You can't just buy your way out of community standards." I smiled. "I did. And buy my way out. I bought what you never owned." That was the first reversal. She didn't know it yet, but the foundation beneath her authority had shifted. Knowledge nugget number 3. When an HOA loses control of an access easement or parcel integral to enforcement, any subsequent actions relying on that access can be voided retroactively. She ended the meeting early, her voice brittle. "We'll review this with council." The crowd lingered, whispering. One older man clapped me on the shoulder. "Took guts," he said. "They've been running this place like a fiefdom for years." But courage doesn't stop retaliation. It invites it. Within days, the smear campaign began. Anonymous posts on Nextdoor called me unstable. Someone reported our dog for excessive barking. Code enforcement left a notice about unpermitted tree trimming, even though the tree had been pruned by the city arborist. I logged every contact, date, time, department, name. 94 entries in total by mid-April. My front porch light felt like a surveillance beacon. One night, as Dana locked the door, she whispered, "I'm scared, Alex." I touched her shoulder. "Me too," I said. "But fear's just proof we're getting close." To everyone reading, how should retaliation like this be punished? When officials or board members weaponize their positions, should penalties include removal, fines, or even criminal charges? Tell me in the comments, because public opinion shapes what lawmakers fix next. By then, I was already preparing my next move, quietly aligning allies, timing my reveal, and waiting for Lorraine's pride to pull her straight into the trap she'd built herself. By late April, every day felt like a test of endurance. I'd wake before dawn to the soft hum of sprinklers, the faint scent of wet soil, and the tap of another envelope against the front door. This one read, "Urgent, non-compliance hearing, May 2nd. The irony was sharp. How do you hold a hearing on land you don't own? Lorraine had doubled down, pretending my deed didn't exist. She even hired a privy, a security firm to patrol the South Corridor. They parked their SUV on my newly acquired easement every night at 9 o'clock sharp, lights strobing across my living room like silent accusations. Dana would close the blinds and whisper, "They're trying to scare us." I'd reply, "They're trying to prove they're still in charge." The retaliation escalated. Someone reported me to the city for running a home business without a permit. 2 inspectors showed up one morning. When they realized I was just an engineer working remote, they apologized, embarrassed. "We've had a string of anonymous complaints," one said, rubbing his forehead. "Looks coordinated." I smiled thinly. "Document everything. It's all going in the file." That file was now 3 inches thick. Inside were 94 documented incidents. Harassment, bogus citations, screenshots of smear posts, even time-stamped photos of Lorraine's SUV idling at the gate. On May 2nd, I walked into the HOA hall with that binder under my arm. The place smelled like burnt coffee and recycled carpet. Lorraine sat flanked by her attorney, a man in a blue tie who introduced himself as Mr. Rhodes, counsel for the board. He began with confidence. "Mr. Ward, the HOA maintains enforcement authority per Section 7 of the CCRs. Your acquisition of an easement parcel does not exempt you from community rules." I let him finish, then opened my binder. "Counsel, your Section 7 relies on geographic control of common areas. Exhibit A, Maricopa County. Deed number 2022-04913 shows that the HOA neither owns nor insures the property they patrol. That renders all citations beyond that line void. Rhodes blinked, reading the document. Lorraine hissed, "This is harassment." I turned to her calmly. Harassment would be attempting entry into my home, filing false reports, or weaponizing city inspections. Should I read the police case number? The room fell silent. That's when Officer Morales stepped through the door, uniform crisp, expression neutral. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but I was asked to attend as a neutral observer per city mediation policy." He set his notepad on the table. "Just here to confirm facts if needed." Perfect timing. Neutral authority. Check. Lorraine's confidence cracked. "We don't need police here." "Actually," Morales said, "given there's an open trespass complaint, it's appropriate." She swallowed hard. I laid out my evidence one piece at a time. Emails, city replies, inspection photos. Each page thudded against the table like a drumbeat. By the end, even Rhodes was shifting in his chair. Morales cleared his throat. "Everything Mr. Ward's shown aligns with property and law enforcement records. The HOA doesn't have lawful access to that easement. Continuing patrols there could constitute trespass." Silence again, then murmurs from the crowd. One neighbor whispered, "He's right. They've been overstepping for years." That was visual beat number one, the moment Lorraine's power dimmed under fluorescent lights and legal ink. By the time I left that hall, the sun had dipped low, painting the asphalt gold. Dana met me outside, hand trembling against mine. "So what now?" she asked. "Now," I said, "we let them implode under their own paperwork." For everyone watching, here's the question that matters. If a homeowner wins against an HOA like this, should they push for personal penalties against board members, or focus on reforming the system so it never happens again? Tell me what justice looks like to you, or at least like the video if you think this kind of accountability matters. Lorraine didn't resign. Not yet. Pride like hers doesn't bow, it splinters slowly. But I could see the cracks. The night after that hearing, their security truck vanished from my easement. No more spotlights through the window. No more envelopes taped to the door. Just quiet, the kind that hums with anticipation before the next storm. Ben called me 2 days later. "You'll like this," he said, voice buzzing with caffeine and victory. "I checked the HOA's lender filings. They're up for insurance renewal next quarter. If your parcel's missing from their coverage, the underwriter has to flag it as a compliance risk." He sent over the form. One line read, "Common area access. Verified ownership required." Without that, their insurer could suspend coverage for board actions. That was the leverage I hadn't even known I needed. Knowledge nugget number 4. When an HOA's insurance coverage lapses or faces suspension due to governance irregularities, directors can become personally liable for enforcement actions taken during that gap. I drafted a letter, not a threat, just facts. Attached were copies of the deed, Officer Morales' statement, and the transcript from the May 2nd meeting. I CC'd their insurance carrier, Pacific Standard Mutual, and their lender, Desert Community Bank. 1 week later, an email reply landed in my inbox. "We are reviewing Foothills East HOA's policy integrity in light of newly presented property ownership documentation." That single sentence was worth more than any fine they'd ever thrown at me. By the end of May, board meetings turned into whisper sessions. Dale stopped making eye contact at the mailbox. Neighbors started asking quiet questions about term limits and audits. And then came the inevitable call. Lorraine's voice was shaky, brittle at the edges. "Alex, can we meet? Just talk, no lawyers." I agreed, on neutral ground. Carl's driveway, broad and visible. She arrived clutching a folder like a life preserver. "You've made your point," she began, "but this publicity, this scrutiny, it's hurting everyone." "Truth has side effects," I said. She sighed. "What do you want?" There it was, the question I'd waited months to hear. "I want reform," I said. "Term limits, no more than 2 consecutive years for board members. Transparent budgets. Open records policy. Independent ethics review for fines and enforcement. And rollback of every unjust fee charged since January." Her eyes darted. "That's unrealistic." "Then maybe the insurer will set your reality for you." Silence stretched between us. The neighborhood was still except for the low whir of a distant air conditioner and the faint smell of creosote after rain. Finally, she whispered, "Give me something to bring the board." "You'll get my full proposal tomorrow," I said. "In exchange, you cease all enforcement actions and issue written notice acknowledging the property boundary error." She nodded, defeated but relieved. "If I agree, you'll stop?" "I'll stop when fairness starts." She left without another word. I watched her taillights fade, that folder clutched in her lap like an overdue confession. That night, Dana poured me a bourbon, her hand steady for the first time in weeks. "You did it," she said. "Not yet," I replied. "Tomorrow's the set piece." Because tomorrow, I'd present my proposal publicly, with Lorraine seated at the same table, under the same lights, facing every neighbor she'd find. For those watching, imagine being in her shoes. Would you admit fault to save your reputation, or double down and risk losing everything? Tell me in the comments. I'm curious where pride ends and responsibility begins. The following evening, the hall filled again. Same fluorescent hum, same cracked linoles. Same folding chairs creaking under crossed arms. But this time the air felt different, tense curiosity instead of blind compliance. Lorraine sat at the head table, her pearls absent, a paper cup of water trembling in her hands. I took my place at the podium with a single file box beside me, neatly labeled Reform Proposal, Ward. The sound of the binder latch echoed when I flipped it open. "This meeting," I began, "isn't about punishment. It's about repair." I placed the first document on the projector. Here are the facts verified by Maricopa County Recorder's Office. The HOA's jurisdiction stops 27 feet short of my southern boundary. That mistake cascaded into 117 unlawful citations across the neighborhood. Gasps cut through the hall. I heard someone whisper, "I got one of those." Lorraine cleared her throat. "We dispute that interpretation." "Then please explain," I said, "why your insurer and lender both acknowledged the discrepancy last week." I clicked to the next slide, emails from Pacific Standard Mutual and Desert Community Bank confirming the suspension of coverage pending governance review. Officer Morales, seated near the back again as neutral observer, stood. "For the record," he said, "these communications are authentic. I verified them with the agencies." That single statement shifted the room's center of gravity. Lorraine's attorney, Mr. Rhodes, leaned forward. "We request this be discussed in executive session." "Denied," Morales replied evenly. "Executive sessions can't be used to conceal matters of public interest or potential misconduct." The crowd erupted, murmurs, claps, even a few cheers. I raised my hand for quiet. This is how communities die, when oversight becomes secrecy. But we can still fix this. I slid a second document across the table. My reform terms. 2-year term limits for board members. Transparent annual budgets published online. Independent ethics panel elected by residents. Automatic fee rollback for invalid citations. Public audit of all reserves and insurance payments. Lorraine's voice was barely audible. "And in return?" "In return," I said, "I'll formally release my easement rights back to the HOA under new governance once reforms are codified and approved by a 2/3 homeowner vote." Silence again, then a slow, tentative clap from Carl. It spread, hesitant at first, then full, shaking the ceiling tiles. Lorraine's chin quivered, the paper cup collapsing slightly in her grip. "This isn't blackmail," I added. "It's balance. The law gives us the tools, but community gives them meaning." Visual beat number 2 burned itself into memory, the gavel clattering against the table as Lorraine, voice hollow, said, "Motion to accept the proposal, pending legal review." When the meeting adjourned, Elliot Brand, the reporter, was waiting outside under the sodium light. "That," he said, "was the quietest coup I've ever seen." "Not a coup," I corrected, "a reset." He smiled, pen hovering. "Mind if I quote that?" "Go ahead," I said. "Truth looks better in print." Neighbors lingered in small clusters, shaking hands, whispering plans for audits and elections. The air smelled of desert sage and possibility. Dana leaned against me, whispering, "It's finally turning." But change is a slow tide. I knew there'd still be undertow. To everyone watching, what would you push for if your HOA had to reform tomorrow? Transparent budgets, elected oversight, or maybe just respect for privacy? Leah, if your reform wish in the comments. It's not theory anymore. It's what keeps neighborhoods human. The sun dipped behind the Catalina foothills, bleeding gold into rust when the reform vote began. Folding chairs filled every corner of the hall, 82 homeowners, all with ballots trembling between their fingers. The board's lawyer sat stiffly at one side. Morales again occupied his quiet post near the back, arms crossed, neutral as stone. Lorraine opened the meeting with a voice I barely recognized, soft, almost human. "We've all learned from this," she said, scanning faces she'd once ruled by fear. "Mr. Ward's proposal will now be presented for vote." I stood again at the same podium, this time without a binder, just a single envelope. "I promised fairness," I said, "not vengeance." I passed the envelope to Morales, who broke the seal and read aloud. "I, Alexander Ward, hereby release Parcel 22A easement rights to the Foothills East Homeowners Association, conditional upon full enactment of the attached reforms within 30 calendar days of majority approval." The room held its breath as the ballots slid into the metal box, one by one, paper rasping like dry leaves. Carl, appointed as vote counter, read them aloud. "Yes, yes, yes." The rhythm quickened. 59, 60, 61. By 65, the outcome was clear. Reversal number 2 complete. Lorraine exhaled audibly, tears just visible in the fluorescent light. "Motion passes," she whispered. "Reforms adopted." A quiet applause swelled into cheers. Dana's hand found mine, warm and steady. Carl laughed his wheezy laugh for the first time in months. Marisol simply nodded, murmuring, "That's what lawful looks like." Visual beat number 3 etched itself into memory. Morales, stamping the final reform charter with a city seal, the echo rolling through the hall like the sound of a verdict. Afterward came the montage of AFTI. Armath, Elliot Brand's article splashed across local headlines. Engineer buys back his rights, forces HOA reform. Desert Community Bank lifted the insurance hold. Pacific Standard Mutual reinstated coverage under the new bylaws. Lorraine resigned quietly a week later, replaced by a younger member who ran on transparency and decency. Fines were refunded, including the $350 they'd stacked against me. I took the check and used every dollar to seed the Foothills Education Grant, $3,350 for neighborhood kids entering trade school, because winning means nothing if it doesn't repair something bigger. A month later, I walked the easement at sunset, the same strip once patrolled by their golf cart. The gravel crunched under my boots. Cicadas hummed. The air smelled faintly of creosote and warm steel. I thought about Dad, about promises kept. For everyone who's followed this story, if you believe I fought the right way, and this is how justice should look, say something in the comments for a friend who might be facing their own fight. Subscribe so you don't miss the next case, and share this so others learn. That's on us. Now the neighborhood has a new rule pinned to the bulletin board. Authority is stewardship, not ownership. It's printed on recycled paper, dated June 2nd, signed by every resident, including me. As for me, I keep the old binder locked in my workshop. Sometimes I glance at it, dust motes floating in the afternoon sun, and think, maybe the next one will be easier, or maybe not. But when it comes, I'll be ready.